Welcome to Systems Philosophy. In the previous episode, I introduced the concept of culture as a new information field existing independently of the beings that carry it, as a sort of virtual software. Just like software has to exist on some medium, be it memory storage or within the working memory of a computer or offline storage, living culture has to exist within a living mind. You can no more separate culture from the mind in reality than you can separate the genetics of a cell from the machinery that reads and carries out the instructions. We abstract genes, we even sequence genes, and we can even put new genes into cells and make them build proteins on our behalf. Culture works the same way, even though it always exists on a physical medium of a mind or a brain. The neurons, the biological cells that process information in animals, and it can never be abstracted. The territory is the territory. Reality is reality. Everything else is a framing, a paradigm, a map, an abstraction or a simulation that we make of the territory. Culture falls into that category. It can be abstracted because culture can be transmitted from parent to offspring and from one member of a group to another. Just like software can be copied from one memory device to another, from one computer to another, and once copied, the new computer can be used as the medium to run the software in just the same way that a cultural meme, and meme was originally the cultural equivalent of a gene, a small fragment of information that gets transmitted. So a cultural meme is transmitted separate from genetics, separate from any physical medium. It's simply transmitted as an idea, as one mind communicating with another mind and understanding through the translation of body, sound, speech, scent, what that mind intended, and through that translation getting the deeper meaning behind the idea. Going back to simple transmission in mammals of culture, and yesterday, well, it was yesterday for me, but in the previous podcast, in the previous episode, what I said about mammals rearing their young, that is extremely important, is that mammals are named for the mammary gland, for the milk that the mothers feed their offspring. The young are bound by their very need for nourishment to the mother, which makes mammals the perfect conduit for cultural transmission, because the child and the mother have to have a close bond. There needs to be behavior that limits instincts like biting so that the offspring doesn't damage the mother as it feeds. Things like child-maternal bonds become instinctively encoded, because it's a survival advantage if that bond builds and we have some inkling of chemical systems like oxytocin that act on the neurons and the brain signaling and the memory and the mood in order to reinforce those bonds. Cultural transmission in mammals has become vital to the survival of the offspring. A case in point is that many mammals and birds will need rehabilitation if they are held in captivity or raised in captivity and need to be released into the wild. This is the nature versus nurture debate being shown experimentally. Even animals that can instinctively work out what it is they should be eating and where they should find shelter may not instinctively know their own enemies, what to run from, how to hide. Cultural behaviour patterns that mean that the chances of survival of most mammals, I can't say that with certainty, of many mammals, from the stories I've heard, who have been raised in captivity that need to be rehabilitated before they can successfully be rewilded. The rehabilitation is the lack of culture. They need to relearn, either through the people rehabilitating them or through trial and error, a learning experience that they may have missed in their childhood phase, the nurture and play that many juvenile mammals experience before they have to face the law of the jungle, so to speak, the true odds of survival without a mentor or a parent there to protect and to guide. For mammals, culture has become symbiotic, not in the terms of an organism. We can have the original term for symbiont is a parasite that doesn't weaken the host, but in some way works with the host so that they form a partnership that improves their survival. You could say that the mitochondria is a symbiont in the eukaryote that allows the eukaryote to metabolize in oxygen-rich environments. You could say that the colonies of fungi and bacteria, fungi, that exist in lichens have formed a symbiotic relationship between each other with photosynthetic capability. Anyway, I won't go into the details of lichen that I don't know offhand. So the concept of the symbiont, the original parasite that has turned into at least cooperative partner, if not required other half, the merger of two separate forms into one, can be applied to culture. Culture has become symbiotic with mammalian learning. Something like a reptile or a fish or even an octopus can hatch from an egg, and as if the young survives, and the chances of survival are far less than the adult, then the juvenile will learn everything it needs to through trial and error, through instinct, through the evolved form. A lot of instinct is embedded within the form, the chemical systems, the neural circuitry that grow. And that form creates a sort of analog computer, a model of the world that has been fine-tuned to learn quickly enough for enough individuals to survive, given the reproductive strategy. The learning is done within the single lifetime, and it needs to be tuned to the environment, but not necessarily to the behavior of other individuals. Once we start with culture, the transmission of information from one individual to another, what we get is we get the need for what has been termed by psychologists as mirror neurons, and possibly even theory of mind. The ability to recognize what the parent or the other member of one's species is demonstrating, to take that action, to put oneself in their place, and then to realize the message that's being transmitted. Some forms of culture, like a bird call, could be mere association. So a certain call might mean danger, certain behaviors might signal danger, like hiding or running or acting in a panicked way, and learning can still be just through pure association, and the association of seeing the herd that you participate in panic or stampede might form a natural response in that you panic and stampede because your body's hormonal and reaction circuitry naturally mimic that behavior. So we already have a pathway for cultural transmission that precedes mirror neurons. So I'm not saying that mirror neurons needed to evolve for culture to evolve. However, since cultural transmission significantly improves the chances of a juvenile surviving, any evolutionary adaptations that favour that transmission will also favour survival, because you improve the amount of information, the fidelity of that transmission, instead of just the general mood of the herd or the flock or the surrounding environment. An alarm call in the jungle will speak not just to that species of bird. There are plenty of minds in the jungle who can associate that call with danger. We can think of that as an information field held within the ecology, a sort of standing cultural field that even predates cultural transmission. And also other species that can react to that call will have a survival advantage. And so evolution works not just species to species, but within the general ecology. That said, the evolution of mirror neurons and being able to observe another and put yourself in their shoes, the ability to look in a mirror and realize that it's you, is the ultimate endpoint. But it need not be that way. You can still associate the other and their behavior with yourself and your behavior, especially in social species that is an easy thing, an easy bridge to cross. And I'm speculating with a lot of this. I'm deductively reasoning through what the abstraction of culture combined with systems philosophy, systems theory of evolution says should happen if culture imbues a survival advantage. Then the algorithm of evolutionary fitness will explore different avenues that improve that advantage and the fidelity of information transmission. Something like a call, a sound, can simply echo your emotional state. If you hurt yourself, you go, ow. If you're scared, you may scream, you may cry out. If you're happy, you may laugh. These are instinctive behaviours that humanity has retained, common to all of us, no matter what our cultural imprinting are. And they date back way past our human ancestry. And if you look at the animal sounds and calls, even insects like cicadas produce mating calls. Frogs, reptiles have calls. Birds especially, and in birds in the previous episode I have specifically said that bird calls are culturally at least steerable, so they are a combination of nature and nurture, instinct and learning. And even in humans, cultural symbionts to the extreme, where we cannot really survive without our culture, without the education we receive as children. We are born as helpless babes, and if those babes are placed in the woods without any sort of culture, it is highly unlikely that a human child will survive. I've lost my framing now, my track. I'm simply saying that evolution will build upon ever more complex coupling between the individual and its culture. Humans perhaps are the extreme example. We have doubled down on culture, and it has allowed us to inherit the earth in terms of our ability to manipulate our fellow beings, the ecology and biology of this planet. You might argue that we haven't tamed bacteria, and bacteria are still biologically more numerous and even in mass more numerous than we are. And so some of my framing is incorrect, and I could understand that perspective. That's another perspective. I'm coming at the point of humanity from a certain framing. And by jumping from one perspective to another, we're building mental agility. You could say, yes, these single-celled organisms never gave up their dominance of this planet. They're the most robust, adaptable things, and no matter how many biocides we throw at them, they will adapt and persist. They have survived every extinction event, every evolutionary branch, and they're still there in the background. That framing exists. What I'm saying is that by unlocking culture, and perhaps thanks to the extinction of the dinosaurs that unlocked a huge number of ecological niches that were tightly held by previous species, mammals have grown to dominate the megafauna of this planet, the larger animals and their forms, and with them has come mammalian culture. The accident of the impacted meteor that destroyed the ecology of the Triassic and led into the new age of mammals also freed the ecological space for culture to evolve and diversify. And even before the invention of tools, technology, and language by humanity, culture was thriving within mammals, being evolutionarily selected for survival of the offspring, being carried in groups like prides of lions or packs of wolves, or in individuals from parent to offspring, and acting as a different information carrier, as an information field that has become separate and important to survival and is itself evolving and being modified over time in reflexive dynamic equilibrium, needing to be transmitted with enough fidelity so that the offspring's survival is carried through the culture of the parent, and still varying through misunderstanding, through forgetting, through innovation. So the culture and the information that an individual is taught isn't necessarily the culture and information that the individual transmits, because between being a juvenile and between raising your own offspring, there is also the learning that evolved prior to culture. So culture is a foundation that is built upon, and it can vary much more quickly than the physical genetics, even with sexual reproduction. A lesson learnt by one parent can be transmitted to the child and give that lineage an advantage. A lesson learnt by one community can be one member of a community can be transmitted to all those members. It can even bridge communities so that adjacent communities can observe the behaviour, and it can slowly make its way through an entire population. And even a particular call, an alarm call that proves useful in an ecology, can slowly become embedded within the biology of other species as a useful environmental trigger for danger. These are all examples of how the dynamic equilibrium of systems, either individually, ecologically, in a community, in a culture, in a gene pool, interact and modify, working as modules, both from our perception and also from the point of view of remaining anti-fragile, so that when change comes, in order to preserve what has already been gained without having to rebuild from scratch, the change needs to encapsulate the existing order in order to build upon it. And often that change will itself modularize the mechanism. And in this way, the mechanism of culture has become also a mechanism of change, information storage, and transmission that is novel and abstract. I think that will do us for today. Thank you for your attention. This is Systems Philosophy.